tapping doesn't work for me. That's what one of my clients said, an absolute aspiration when we were touching base recently. And the reason why she was saying this is the progress that she had been making had stalled. And when the progress stops, we look at the things that we might be able to change, and she was looking at the tool set. But the reality is, sometimes there are plateaus or there are perceived plateaus in our transformation. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about 6 things we can do when it feels like healing and transformation has stalled. This is Monterastelli, and welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast, recorded live to tape from Williamsburg in Brooklyn. This is episode 648, originally aired February 5th, 2025. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds you well wherever you are and whatever time of day you're getting a chance to listen to this. Thanks for spending a little time with me. When we are doing healing and transformation, it can be really frustrating to not see progress. It can be really frustrating to be stuck. Because when that happens, it doesn't feel like we slowed down. It feels like we have reached an insurmountable wall that is impossible for us to get past. And when we bump into those things, it's really easy to be demotivated and to just not want to try. And I know exactly what this is like because I encounter this in my own transformational journey as well. So here are 6 simple things that I do when it feels like I'm slowing down, I've plateaued, or it's just not working. So number 1 is I like to tap on the emotion about the issue. And so what I mean by this is I have an emotional response to the fact that I have stopped moving forward. It's not that I've just stopped, but I'm frustrated, or I'm disappointed, or I'm overwhelmed, or I'm judging myself, or I'm judging the tool, or I'm judging the process, or I'm judging my worthiness to be able to heal. And so the moment I start to stall, I ask myself the question, I take a nice big deep breath, and I go, how do I feel about the fact that I am not making progress? And then I just jot down everything that comes up. And for me, I find it useful to reflect in this way before I start tapping or using any other tool set, because I want to have as detailed a picture as possible. And when I do that, I will even go, and I'll jot some things down, and I'll sit in the question a little longer, and then I'll go, the way I feel about being stalled is... And I force myself to spend a little more time with it because I don't want to just get the surface emotions. I want to get everything that is underneath it as well. And so now that I have this list of emotions, it gives me the ability to tap for that particular thing. And so it would look just like this. I recognize the fact I am really frustrated by the fact my healing and transformation has stalled. And the frustration that I'm feeling is just that part of me that wants better, that wants me to heal, that wants me to transform, that wants better, that wants the pain to stop. And I give the frustration permission to know it has been heard loud and clear. And it is okay for me to be frustrated about the process because my frustration is rooted in wanting better. Nice big deep breath. And so when I do that, when I give the frustration permission to be heard, I am no longer trying to solve the problem of plateau from this really emotional place. And so when I tap on something like that, oftentimes I start to get clarity. I'm like, oh, I actually am making progress. It's just slower than I would like. Oh, I recognize the fact this is getting in the way and this is how I could do it better. But it's hard for me to assess clearly and accurately what is going on if I'm not in a circumstance where I'm able to get the emotions calmed down. So anytime I'm encountering anything, I always tap about the emotion about the issue. This is a place where you don't often think about that there's an emotion about the issue. But number one, we spend some time tapping about the emotion about the issue. Number two, I like to recognize the fact that even though my transformational plan is linear, first I do this, and then I do this, then I do this, then I do this, the way transformation happens in our life isn't linear, and it isn't something that happens in a progressive way. And one of the analogies I use all the time with my clients is the idea of planting seeds. And so you could plant a seed in your garden and you can water it and you can fertilize it and you can make sure it gets sunshine, and nothing happens on day 1 and day 2 and day 3 and day 4. And then all of a sudden on day 9, boop, it pops out of the ground. Now the plant, the little sprout, did not grow overnight. It didn't grow between day 8 and day 9. We just see the fruits of that growth because it's popped out of the ground. And the frustrating part about transformation is sometimes things are changing, but we don't see change in our life. So for example, I might want to do something. I might want to do some marketing for my business. And I am afraid I'm going to be judged. I'm afraid people are going to reject the offer. I'm afraid that I'm going to look foolish. Now I could take one of those things and I could tap on, I'm going to be judged. And I feel better about being judged. But if I still feel like I'm going to be foolish, or I'm going to be seen as being foolish, then I'm still not going to take action. So even though I've eliminated one of the obstacles, change hasn't happened yet because I haven't cleared all the obstacles in the way. And so it can be really disappointing and frustrating for me not to see change when actual transformation is happening. There's a difference between the transformation we are going through and the fact that it shows up in the world. And sometimes we are transforming before it shows up in the world. So the second thing I like to do is I like to remind myself and sometimes even tap on this idea that transformation is not linear. And it just looks like this. I recognize the fact. I have a plan on how my healing and transformation should happen. And each time I do a little work, my life should be better. But the reality is, transformation is not something that is linear. Transformation can happen in fits and starts. And I also recognize the fact that even though I am transforming and healing and changing in an internal way, it does not mean that change shows up in my life yet. And so I can see why it is frustrating when I do work, but I don't see the immediate consequences. I give myself permission to be gentle with myself and the healing process. As much as I would like it to be quick and straightforward and linear, I recognize that sometimes it happens in fits and starts. So when I tap in that particular way, it calms me down enough to go, okay, great. I understand where I am. I can re-engage with this and move forward. Number 3, whenever I feel like I'm being stalled and it's plateaued, one of the consequences of that sometimes is because I'm trying to make steps that are too large. I'm trying to solve a really, really big problem. And sometimes it might be a simple problem to describe. I would like to build a website. But it isn't a single step thing. There's so many things that go into that. And so if I'm feeling like I am plateauing, I reevaluate what my next step is, and I decide I'm going to work in a smaller step. So as I'm trying to solve a particular problem, I ask myself, great, if I was going to take this problem and I was going to break it down into 3 subproblems, what are the 3 main subproblems? Now, when I ask that question, I don't care if I come up with 3. Because oftentimes what happens is as I start to come up with a list, all of a sudden there's 5 or there's 7 or there's 9, and sometimes there's just 2. But by choosing a specific number that I'm working towards, 3, it's small enough that I'm going to engage with it, but it's large enough that it gives me something bigger, all of a sudden as I start to break the problem down into those bite-sized chunks, it makes it easier for me to engage with the work. And so sometimes the obstacle to my progress is the step size that I am taking. So by breaking it down into smaller, more workable steps, it allows me to make my progress easier. It makes it smaller so I can work on it. And when I get a success with that smaller step, it creates momentum that allows me to move forward. Number 4 is I like to track my progress. Because what happens is the new normal becomes the normal so quickly that it feels like things are stalling because we're constantly focusing on what is going wrong. And so the example I always use with my students in talking about the sense of the new normal and pain is, let's say you have a pain in your knee. And on a SUD scale from 0 to 10, that pain is a 7. And so you do some tapping and the pain reduces to a 4. And all of a sudden at a 4, you're able to move. Life is so much better. And so you wake up tomorrow and it's a 4 and that is great. And you wake up on the second day and it's a 4 and that's great. And you wake up on the next day and it's a 4 and it's great. And you wake up on the next day and you're in pain and it sucks to be in pain. And because that sense of pain is relative and it's been enough time, I can't remember what it feels like to have pain at a level of 7. I only know I'm in pain now. And if I'm creating transformation, the moment I solve a problem, I go, okay, great. Now what's the next thing I can do? Okay, great. What's the next thing I can do? Well, if that's the case, if every single day I'm scratching a problem off and coming up with the next problem, well, then every single day I'm starting with a problem. Well, if I'm always dealing with a problem, it's really easy to feel like I'm not making progress because the things that were hard become easy and I forget they were hard. And so for me, I think it's really, really important to track my transformation, to track the issues I'm working on, and I can learn from that, but it also is a great way for me to reinforce the change that's happened. So as I track my issues every single day as I tap, every 2 weeks or so, I go back and I look at what I've covered in the last 2 weeks and the last month. 1, to learn, to see if there are any patterns, but 2, because it gives me an opportunity to go, oh, I used to struggle with this particular thing. I need to remember that is what is happening. This is such an extreme thing. I one time had a client call himself a liar. This is what happened. We worked over the course of a number of sessions, and somewhere around session 5 or 6, at the beginning of the session, he said, Gene, I really appreciate our time together. I feel like I'm heard. Every single time I'll leave one of these sessions, I always feel a little better, but I don't know if we're really making any big progress. And I'm like, great. I appreciate that insight. Let's take a look. And so what I did is I pulled up his intake form. And I don't mean during an intake session, I took notes, but it was a form he literally typed. These are his words. And so I pulled the form up and I started reading his form back to him. And after I read where he was to demonstrate how much progress we had made, he went, oh, it was never really that bad. The change was so unbelievable and had become so normalized to him, he didn't say it in this way, but he was calling himself a liar. I was exaggerating. And so that's the reason why it's so important that we track our progress in this particular way. If you don't know or you're looking for some insight in how to do that, if you go to tappingtracker.com, that's tappingtracker.com, I have the tapping tracker that I use every single day that you can download so that you can use. There's a 30-day version, there's a 100-day version, and when you go there, absolutely free, there's also a 15-minute training video teaching you the ins and outs of the tracker that I use, tappingtracker.com, if you're looking for a way to track this stuff to make sure you're recognizing your progress. Number 5, recognize the fact that the stalled healing is not a value judgment on us, and it's not a value judgment on our tool set. So often when things start working, like, oh, I am bad at this, or oh, this tool set doesn't work. And the reality is it's not getting us the results we want right now. And that's different than not working. And so for me, I find it really, really useful to go, I recognize the fact there is a part of me that feels like this stalled healing is my fault. If I just worked harder, if I just did more work, if I was more focused, then the healing would happen. And the stall feels like it is because it is my fault. I give myself permission to recognize that healing is a process, and just because I'm not having the results I want right now. It doesn't mean it's my fault. It doesn't mean I am failing. I give myself permission to trust myself, my tools, and the process to allow healing to unfold. Now, after you do something like that, pay attention to the emotions that come up. If there's still a sense of judgment, if there's still a sense of concern, it's a great opportunity for us to keep working in that particular way. But if I am blaming myself, then I'm going to stop trying, because the one thing that is never going to change from my transformation is the fact that I am present to it. And if the reason it's not working is me, then I'm going to continue to believe the reason it's not working is me. And so there's a great opportunity to put ourselves in a position where we let go of that self-judgment so we can be more open to what's going on. Number 6, reach out for external help. Sometimes we are in a circumstance where we are too close to the issue at hand. And because we're so close to the issue at hand, we might be taking action, working on something in a way that isn't going to give us the progress and the success that we would like. And so reaching out could simply be, hey, I'm struggling with this thing. Can I talk it through with you? Hey, I'm struggling with this thing. Do you have any advice for me? Or we could be in a circumstance where the issue is so big, we reach out to help from our practitioner. So for example, one of the rules in my life I have is if I have a to-do that gets moved on my to-do list 3 days in a row where I'm supposed to do it on Monday and I don't do it, I'm supposed to do it on Tuesday and I don't do it, I'm supposed to do it on Wednesday and I don't do it, that is a trigger for me that says I have to reach out for help. I have to call my practitioner. I have to get on his calendar. We have to do some work around this particular issue. Because if I know how to create transformation, but I'm not, then it means either I don't know how to solve this particular problem or I am too close to this problem. And so I want you to hear this from me, a person who people regularly come to for help. In my personal life, they pay me as a practitioner, someone who I think is really good at this transformational thing. There are things that I am too close to that make it hard for me to move forward. And so I reach out for help. So if you're reaching a plateau and you've tried the 5 things before here and it is not working for you, then it is time for you to reach out for some help. And that's not a failing, and it's not that you're doing it wrong. It's just sometimes we are so close to our own experience, we can't see what is going on or we can't see where we need to be doing the work. So there are 6 things that you can do when you feel like you've plateaued. Tap for the emotion about the issue, recognizing that healing is not linear. Work in smaller steps. Track your progress. Tap for the fact that it's not your fault. And finally, reach out for help. So those are the things I reach for when healing plateaus for me, because it plateaus for me and it's easy for me to get discouraged by that. Hopefully, even if it's just one of these things will be useful for you in your life. If you know someone in your life who could use a little checklist like this to help them to create healing and transformation a little bit easier, I'd encourage you to pass it along to them. Our marketing budget is your word of mouth. There might be someone in your life who could use something like this today. And even if they don't consume this, the fact that you've reached out and said, hey, you were talking about struggling with this thing. Here's a resource that might be useful for you. The fact that you've reached out is going to make them feel better because they're going to feel heard even if they don't consume it. As you look at the screen right now, you will see a playlist of all of the podcasts. There are hundreds of hours of tapping training waiting there just for you. Click on the playlist, and I look forward to talking with you and tapping with you again real soon. Bye-bye.